Good afternoon, everyone. So we heard the title of my presentation. These are two lesser-known routes to Constantinople in Southeastern Europe in the late 15th and early 16th century. Because of its position on the crossroads between Europe and Asia, Southeastern Europe developed several key communication routes that were in use almost continuously from antiquity to the early modern era. While major routes such as the Via Militaris and Via Ignatia have already received considerable scholarly attention, other less known itineraries, particularly those from the late Middle Ages, still remain mostly unexplored. The subject of this paper is the course of two lesser known routes to Constantinople in Southeastern Europe that were in use during the late Middle Ages and early modern period. The primary sources for this research consists of three texts. So one is the treatise Quos Terrarum Limites from 1480-1481 by the humanist and later bishop of Ulcinj, Martin Segon from Novo Brdo, in which the first analyzed route is described. The second one is an anonymous description of the route from Ulcinj to Constantinople, Viaggio per terra da Dolcino a Costantinopoli, originally preserved in the Naples archive and published by Nicolae Iorga, who dated it to around the year 1500, although, as this study will show, it should be dated later. This source is now probably lost due to the destruction of the Neapolitan archive in the World War II, the original source, of course. And the third text is the text by Venetian Captain Marino Cavalli from 1560 with the same title as the previous listed description, which largely corresponds to the text published by Iorga, although it slightly differs both linguistically and in terms of the routes described. This study employs a combination of historical, critical, and cartographic methods in order to reconstruct and compare two routes. Each of the three mentioned texts is examined through historical critical lens to assess its reliability and intertextual connections. A toponymic analysis relies on comparative examination of contemporary maps, source records, and relevant travel literature. Once identified, the sites mentioned in the sources are plotted on map to visualize the approximate trajectories of the routes. Comparative cartographic approach is then applied to the direct overlaps, divergences, and shifts in the itineraries, as we will see later during the presentation. This research aims to reconstruct as precisely as possible the physical courses and historical logic of the routes toward Constantinople. So the first route is Via Inferior. In his treatise Quos Terrarum Limites, which belongs to the genre of crusade proposals written to advise on waging war against the Turks in the second half of the 15th century, Martin Segon describes 6 possible routes to attack the Ottomans. One of them, and the one I focus on here, is what he calls Via Inferior. The journey begins in Belgrade, and I think it's better to have the map here. So the Segon's route is marked with a red color. There is a main route and the alternative route leading from Zaslan. So you can follow the map, I suppose. So the journey begins in Belgrade and continues toward the town of Ostrovica on Mount Rudnik and passing by the monastery of Ravanica. From there, the route moves along the valley of Western Morava River to the town of Kruševac, and then further south to a place Segon calls Basilica Alba, which can be identified with modern-day Kuršumlija. He then mentions the Apennine Mountains, which most likely refers to Kopaonik, the great mountain range of southern Serbia. After crossing Kopaonik, the road descends into the plain of Dubočica in the area of the present-day Leskovac, and from there continues toward the Kosovo field. The traveler passes through by the lake and marsh of Horavica, today's Rahovica, village of Kačanik, and the narrow Klisura George before reaching the town of Skopje. From Skopje, Segon's route proceeds through Žegligovo, corresponding to the region around modern Kumanovo, then to Konopnica and the thermal baths of Velbuž, today's Čustendil. After that, it passes through Samokov and crosses a mountain Segon names Hem, which, although it recalls the Balkan Mountains range, probably refer to the Rila Mountains. Finally, passing through Kostenets, the route reaches the river Marica and the city of Philippopolis, or modern-day Plovdiv, where it joins the well-known Via Militaris to Constantinople. The section of the road from Philippopolis to Constantinople is not described in the chapter on the Via Inferior, because it was listed in the second's previous chapter on the route he calls Prima Via Superior, that is the imperial road or Via Militaris. Although very detailed on the section from Belgrade to Sofia, Second's description of the path from Sofia to Constantinople is rather short, listing only the main spots such as Rhodope Mountains, Philippopolis, Marica River, Adrianople, Hellespont, Dardanelles, Propontis, Sea of Marmara, and finally Constantinople. There was also the alternative route of this Via Inferior, which did not start in Belgrade, but in Zaslon, today's Šabac, continued to Valjevo, passing by the mountains of Cer, Zajača, Krupanj, etc., and merged to the main route at the Great Morava River, in the area around the present-day Ćuprija, that is the part of the main section which passed near Ivanica Monastery, which we previously described. Since the character of Second's description was military strategic, it focused much on passes, forts, mountains, and valleys. The second source, the second route, is analyzed in this research through two mentioned versions of this probably same text. It has a different starting point from the Second's Via Inferior, but overlaps with it in the second half of its section. The text of anonymous itinerary preserved in the Naples archive and the description provided by the Venetian captain Marino Cavalli overlap to a large extent. Because of these two texts can be analyzed together with attention to the points where their descriptions diverge. Let me briefly outline the main stages of the route, moving from Ulcin to on the Adriatic coast toward Constantinople. So we have the map here also. You can see it with this light blue-green color. So the journey begins in Ulcin or Dulcinio, that is in present-day Montenegro, a Venetian port at that time. From the coast, the route continues along the Bojana River, past San Sergi or Sveti Srđ, a medieval Serbian and later Venetian market town and fortress. Although it was taken by the Ottomans after the fall of Shkodër in 1479, it likely retained an economic role for several decades later. This mention in both sources shows that the place was still active in the 16th century. The next localities are more uncertain. A place called Miet or Media in Cavalli's text probably refers to a settlement along the White Drin River, but I can be sure on which location. Other names such as Mila Albania, Terra Nova, and Calubria are difficult to identify with certainty. The text then mentions Goden, corresponding to the present-day settlement in Đakovica with the same name, a point which can be located with high confidence. The next location is Kruza or Krusa. It remains unclear, perhaps referring to the village of Korisha, but with less certainty. After crossing what both texts list as Drin Negro, but which most likely refers to White Drin, not the Black Drin, the route passes through Mardia and then Supotnica, identified with Sopotnica near today's Kačanik. From there it reaches Tutel or Butol in Cavalli's version, clearly Bitola, so based on the name, and continues to Skopje, that is Skopje. Based on the route in this area described earlier by Martin Segon, it seems unlikely that the road led southward toward Bitola and then returned to the north to Skopje to continue eastward. The more plausible solution, based on the logic indicated by the cartographic visualization, would be that the anonymous author of Viaggio and Cavalli had in mind some route by which the traveler could continue southward toward Bitola in order to connect to the route of Via Ignatia toward Thessaloniki. But a route that followed the path through Kosovo field likely reached Skopje from Supotnica following Segon's path. From Skopje, the following stages are Borsenan, Dobrisan in Cavalli, meaning present-day Dobročani, and Stracin, today's Stračinci, with addition that Stracin more likely came first. The next toponym, Horea, cannot be surely identified. The traveler then arrives at a place called Ljusko Danjo or Banjo in Cavalli, suggesting a thermal spa, most likely Sapareva Banjo or another locality in that region known for its hot springs. The next stops are Dopnica, modern-day Dupnica, and Tamako or Samokov in Cavalli's text, corresponding to Samokov, and important mining and ironworking center of that period. The presence of active mining here, together with Zletovo, points to the persistence of Balkan metallurgical activity into the 16th century. The following station, Čustedin, clearly refers to Čustendil, which is listed as, I quote, Banjo Constantino, buona terra buonissimi bagni minerali. Interestingly, the order of places, the Naples manuscript in the Naples manuscript appears confused. Čustendil should logically precede Dupnica and Samokov on the route toward Plovdiv. Furthermore, the place is not listed in Cavalli's description. Passing Samokov, the traveler passes through Sakaliet, also not listed by Cavalli, probably Kostenets, and continues to Tatar Bazarglik or Tatar Bazarjik in Cavalli's, modern-day Pazarjik. Then comes Philippopolis, today's Plovdiv, where the itinerary joins the route of the Via Militaris. Beyond Plovdiv, the next mentioned towns are Lognus, with a large mosque, perhaps on the road toward Adrianople, followed by Semikies, of uncertain location, and Armanlich, that is Hermande, today's Hermande. The next point is Ponte di Mustafa, the great bridge built by Mustafa Pasha over the Marica River at today's Svilengrad. This detail provides a terminus postquem after 1512 for decomposition of the text from Naples. From there, the road continues to Adrianopoli, or Adrianopol, today's Edrine, described as the, I quote, the principal city of Greece. The final stages of the journey passes through Kafsa, modern-day Havsa, Borgus, or Burgas, probably Leleburgas, Kyurlu, modern-day Chorlu, and Silivren, or Silivri, in the Sea of Marmara. Cavalli's version of the text is more precise and clear here, noting that Silivri contained a market or bazaar of the local sanjak. After crossing the Great Bridge near Kyrgyz and smaller bridge which cannot be identified for now, the route finally reaches Constantinople, that is modern-day Istanbul. One of the most notable differences between the two texts lies in the total millage. Cavalli gives a total 451 miles, while the Neapolitan text record 638. This discrepancy, together with textual parallels, indicates that Cavalli used the Neapolitan text as one of the sources for his travel, or that both derived from a shared, now lost source. And as a conclusion, a comparison of Martin Segon's Via Inferior and the itinerary of Viaggio per terra da Dolcino a Constantinopoli reveals two complementary perspectives on the same trans-Balkan communication corridor. Although composed in different contexts, the former in the 1480s as a part of crusading treaties, and later in the early 16th century within a Venetian Ottoman diplomatic and commercial framework, their underlying geographical logic remains similar. Segon's account emphasizes forts, river valleys, staging points suited to the movement of the armies, while the Viaggio privileges ports, markets, mineral baths, bridges, reflecting the needs of merchants and diplomats. Despite these differences in focus and purpose, both itineraries describe routes that ultimately converge along the same geographical axis leading toward Constantinople. The two routes overlap from Skopje eastward along Čustendil-Samokov-Philippopolis corridor, eventually both joining the well-known imperial road or Via Militaris to reach Constantinople. This shared spine should not be understood as a single continuous highway, but rather as a network of interconnected nodes, such as towns like Skopje, Čustendil, Samokov, Philippopolis, linked by the natural corridors, such as river valleys, mountain passes, etc. These nodes were sustained by the economic assets, including mining centers, bazaars, as well as by the Ottoman infrastructure, such as bridges, which ensure the stability of long-distance communication across the peninsula, something which we have heard from Professor Orlandi this morning. The persistence of this corridor is further confirmed by the account of a late 15th century German pilgrim Arnold von Harf, who wrote a travelogue describing his pilgrimage from Cologne to Jerusalem and back. On his return from Holy Land, he followed the imperial road from Constantinople to Philippopolis, but diverged there from the main route, passing westward through Dupnica in the area between Samokov and Kyustendil, reaching Skopje and continuing across the Kosovo field to Pristina and Mitrovica, now Kosovska Mitrovica. Given the description provided by Segon and Viaggio, it could be assumed that von Harf used the route that led from Philippopolis westward to Samokov, Kyustendil, Skopje, and Kosovo field. This persistence from the of the route from the late 15th century into the 16th century reflects a geographical determinism, but also a need for sustaining the economically and strategically important routes. Thank you.